I recently left my job as a deep sea diver. I worked for a large company that offers diving services ranging from salvage, underwater demolition, ship repairs, and search and recovery. They're a reputable company and they're considered safe and reliable, so much so that they're often contracted by the government. Truth be told, I'll miss working for them. The people that I worked with were truly the best of the best. But there are only so many unexplainable things you can witness in the deep before you decide to stay out of the ocean entirely, as in forever. Here are some examples of the secrets that many divers take to their graves. On the way to one job we were contracted to perform, our propeller became fouled. I suited up and prepared to make a quick dive to remove the fouling. I did a brief inspection and located a thick line wrapped around the prop and the shaft. Then I notified the supervisor, who lowered a canvas bag filled with the tools that I'd need to cut it off. I hung the bag from the shaft and began freeing the propeller. It didn't take long, and I returned my tools to the bag. I noticed a strange crunching sound when I dropped the tools into the bag, and when I looked in there, it was full of large shells, many of which I had just crushed. After getting out of the water and stripping off my gear, I started examining them. The shells had what appeared to be hieroglyphics etched into them. I learned from one of the senior guys that this wasn't common, but it had happened to several of the other men before. On one other occasion, we were recovering a military aircraft. When we arrived, naval ships were on the scene, waiting for us to recover it for them. We were quickly briefed that they had lost communication with the pilot and wanted us to recover it so that they could investigate. I was sitting comms and logs, that's communicating with the divers and monitoring depth, bottom time, all of those things. Well, when the divers reached the project, they reported that the plane was intact. We were all surprised. The supervisor asked how extensive the damage was, and they explained it was completely intact, as in there was no visible damage at all. It was just resting on the bottom. Even stranger, the aircraft canopy was still in place. That means the cockpit was still sealed. In other words, the pilot hadn't ejected. But there was no sign of the pilot anywhere. We recovered the plane, and the military took custody of it, and we never heard anything about it again. I witnessed another strange occurrence from topside at the location of a planned demolition. It's necessary to explain that one way you can keep track of a diver is to watch their bubble stream. See, when a diver inhales, the helmet's demand regulator provides air from their umbilical. When they exhale, it's exhausted into the water and the bubbles float up to the surface. On topside, you can watch the bubble stream to get a general sense of where the divers are. Now, on this occasion, we were hundreds of miles from land and had placed 2 divers in the water. About an hour into the dive, we started noticing something was happening. There were 3 distinct bubble streams coming from where they were working. I mean, at first we assumed that there was a current and something funky was affecting them, but soon we noticed a 4th set of bubbles coming in from a distance. It stopped about 20 feet from the divers near the other mysterious bubbles. We asked the divers, but neither of them could see anything out of the ordinary. Then, even from the surface, we heard a blood-curdling screech from underwater, then silence. The divers weren't too concerned, but we hear strange things all the time. Sound travels well in the water, and you learn to assume that it's a long distance away. But soon, it looked like the water in the distance was boiling, and it was getting closer. It wasn't boiling, though. It was countless new bubble streams moving nearer to the location where our divers were working. The supervisor ordered the divers to get onto the dive stage to be lifted back to the surface. The bubbles were frighteningly close now, and the divers being lifted out said they'd begun seeing shadowed figures in the distance. They couldn't quite make out what they were, though. We elected to pull the divers out without completing their decompression stops and throw them into our hyperbaric chamber. During another dive near the Bahamas, I had a frightening experience. It was my first salvage job with them, so I got in with a highly experienced diver. At just over 200 feet deep, we were examining this sunken vessel for rigging points. As I approached the bow of the ship, I noticed that he was investigating a damaged portion of the hull. He swam a few feet into the ship, looking around, and I asked him a few times if he wanted me to tend his umbilical, his air supply hose, from just outside the ship. This is highly advisable since it's dangerous to actually enter a sunken ship. To which he said no, because he didn't want to enter the ship. He insisted that he was over on the port side. Assuming he'd become disoriented, I reached in to grab him, and just before touching him, I realized there were no bubbles coming from that helmet. Whatever this was, it wasn't breathing. I backed up and reported that something else was down here with us. I expected mockery, but there was none. The next thing I heard was the diving supervisor. Both divers, square yourselves away and get ready to leave bottom. When back on the surface, I asked the sup about it, and he said he refused to put his divers in exceptionally dangerous situations. Then he refused to clarify, and we declined to complete the salvage. Now, I'm not entirely sure how to explain this next dive. I was there, on the bottom, laying on my back staring up toward the surface. All I could see were varying shades of darkness. And suddenly I came to my senses. I had no memory of gearing up, of getting in the water. I had no memory how I got there at all. I realized I couldn't remember even why I was here. I tried to will my body to stand up, but I realized I couldn't move. I couldn't control my body. Over the comms, I could hear Topside instructing the other diver to find me. How long had I been down here? How long had I been missing? The other guy told Topside that they grabbed him. I tried to shout out, but I couldn't even do that. After a few frantic minutes of communication between the diver and Topside, I noticed a shadow growing closer, growing clearer. It was moving toward me. Topside, I found him. He reached down, grabbed my harness to drag me back to our dive stage. As he pulled me, I rolled over and got a brief glance at my surroundings. I had been laying in a pile of human bones. One of the strangest things I've ever witnessed happened on a body recovery mission. Even I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't been the one in the water. The military had found a site in which they believed the bodies of several missing World War II sailors could be found. I entered the water with another diver with body bags to carry the remains. On bottom, we eventually found 3 skeletons. We placed them in the bags and returned to the stage. On our return trip to the surface, we saw the bags begin to move. At first very slightly, then violently shaking and rolling. Bubbles escaped from 2 of the bags, and then they went still. The 3rd bag continued struggling. We reached surface and sat down on the deck, stripping our gear immediately. We were afraid to touch the bags, but one of the tenders eventually unzipped the moving bag. And a very old, frail, very alive man rolled out, coughing up water. We stood, shocked, unable to comprehend what we were witnessing. Still not sure what I was doing, I ran to the other 2 bags and unzipped them. There were 2 more old men laying motionless in the bags. They appeared to have just drowned. We attempted CPR, but we were unable to revive them. The other man, who was somehow now alive, was backing away from us, screaming about the horrors that he'd witnessed, about an eternity spent burning. We locked him in a room and contacted the military that we had found a survivor. Within the hour, a military chopper was hovering over us to pick up the 2 bodies and the survivor. We placed the bodies back in their bags and handed them over. The military man bent over to inspect them, unzipping the bags, and as he opened them, this unbearable stench overtook us. The bodies appeared to be in decay, as if they'd been dead and soaking in the water for a week. He zipped them back up and had them lifted to the chopper. Then we escorted him to the survivor. We could hear the screaming from down the hall. We opened the door and saw blood splattered on the walls. He was alive and screaming, but he too appeared to have started decaying. The man calmly walked him to the chopper, and the 2 of them were lifted on board. Then they left. We never heard about any of this again. However, I went back and examined the room that he'd been kept in. With his blood, he had drawn hieroglyphics on the walls. I'm still not certain of what it was I was viewing, but there were a few things that seemed to stand out. Waves, flames, bodies. There was a tremendous amount of them on the walls, but shortly after I walked in, our supervisor began scrubbing them off. He refused to let us examine them any further. I've heard rumors about the Keepers of the Deep. I've wondered about them for quite some time. Now, I believe that they're the link between many of our stories. Their myth within our team is seldom spoken of, but here's what I've gathered over the years. Humans are land creatures. We're not meant to roam the depths of the ocean. And when a diver loses his life down there in the deep, it doesn't stay that way. We're cursed to forever roam the oceans. And when they do, and when they find the living, in an envious rage, they will bring you back to the depths from which they came.